Hola amigos, bien o qué. Saludos otra vez desde Medellín y hoy um, muchos cambios aquí en el clima. Entonces no tengo mucho tiempo. Eh, Creo es voy a llover en corto tiempo. Ok, pero poco más inglés hoy en este tema. So, hoy yo voy a hablar un poco como um, en este proyecto de 90 días, es casi terminando, cómo funciona, cuáles son los herramientas que yo utilizar para avanzar mi español y algo pensamientos en qué pasó, que está bien o no. So este es el tema de hoy. So today, from a very changeable weather we have here in Medellin, I have time before the rain gets here. I'm going to reflect a little bit more at length in English on how I've been doing in these last 90 days, in this, it's now about 74, 75 days, I think, now, into this 90-day project to improve my Spanish. So I'm going to talk about what I've been doing to improve that, what tools, what techniques I've been using to help me, and I'm going to reflect a little bit on how I think I've been doing and other problems I've come across. So, at the beginning, I would say my level of Spanish was intermediate. So in some situations, my Spanish was okay, but in other situations, it wasn't really. So I knew I needed to improve a bit, and I'd realised that although I understood a lot of what I was hearing, I couldn't respond quickly enough in situations, or if I was asked a question, I'd become too confused as to how I should best answer that. When I looked at why I was confused, why I wasn't able to answer this fluidly, because I could understand the question, I realised there were some parts of the, let's say the grammar, some of the constructions of how you had to phrase things that I'd got confused. I hadn't quite understood clearly what sense of time I was expressing with some of these sentences. So I was getting my past, present and future mixed up. And that was leading to confusion with the people I was holding the conversation with, because they would then ask me another question like, what do you mean yesterday? And then I'd become confused because I thought I was talking about today, and why are we talking about yesterday? And then the conversation would, fall apart. We'd have more problems. So I recognised that was a difficulty. So I thought, well, the best way to do this then was to go back to some more general teach yourself Spanish, easy grammar type books, because at least there they show you very clearly with sentences and examples how to express particular, let's say, expressions of time, past, present, future, these kind of things. So I used 3 of those principally. I've used those in rotation throughout these sort of now 70 odd days. And that's been very useful because it has at least shown up and has given me multiple examples of how these sentences are formed. Now I have to say I'm not a big advocate for just trying to memorize changes of verbs and things like that. I think sometimes that can become a bit of a, let's say, a sterile exercise. I prefer to look for usable sentences for particular situations, and then to understand very clearly what that sentence is expressing. And then I look for similar sentences in other situations, and then I start to see patterns, hopefully, in, okay, so this is how generally we express the future or the past. So that's generally the way I look to do this. It's not about memorizing great big lists of vocabulary or verb changes and things like that. I try and keep it very specific to something practical that I'm going to use in a particular situation, and then when I've developed a list of several situations, I look for patterns within those of how I'm expressing like the past, present, future. So I've used those 3 books. I think of the 3, probably Guillau's book, ironically, which is supposed to be teaching Spanish speakers English, Inglés Básico, I've always found one of the most useful. I have to read it in Spanish, so I'm like reverse engineering my learning of Spanish in a way, because I read it all sort of back to front. I'm looking at the English translations of the Spanish sentences. But I found that one particularly useful because often it is in quite useful sentences. But outside of the books and my writing shorter dialogues for situations I knew I often encountered, so like going to the shops, going on the metro, asking directions, asking for stuff at the library or in the shops, things like that. Outside of those type of dialogues, I could predict, this is a conversation I have frequently, let's see if I can improve it. The single most useful thing so far has actually been listening to a very wide variety of podcasts or YouTube videos in Spanish on particular topics, or very disparate topics, actually quite different topics. But what I do, I will pick a topic. It could be all sorts of things. Sometimes it's something I've heard in the news. I thought, well, let's find out more about that. And then I look for multiple videos by different Spanish speakers on that topic. And I try to pick sort of 4 to 5 different speakers. And there could be a lot more videos, maybe 10 to 20 different videos, perhaps if they're quite short videos, on the topic. And I'm listening then for repetition of key vocabulary, the really important words. And I'm also listening then for different ways different people express themselves and how they explain particular things. That's also useful. So then I'm listening for different accents, say different types of expression, and I'm also getting repetition of the useful vocabulary. So that I think has really helped me quite a lot. Outside of those, then I try to pick a couple of books from the library, again in Spanish, but normal reading books. I try to pick more sort of history, business, economics type books, but that's partly because it's more my taste of things I like to read anyway. But I find them a little easier to read because they're straightforward. They're just trying to explain something to you. Whereas if I had picked novels, although they're very worthy to read, sometimes the use of language is a bit too symbolic, or it can be a bit too descriptive, or maybe just too much dialogue. So perhaps it can be a little confusing, particularly if it's more symbolic language. So I found generally histories, biographies, and I say business books because they're usually written to be read fairly quickly, I found them to be the most useful source. And again, by reading aloud rather than just reading silently, that's helped me a lot. I feel a lot more confident in how I sound now in Spanish. So that's certainly been a big thing. And this is where also some of the podcasts and other YouTube videos I've listened to has also helped, because with some of those, particularly the shorter form ones, I'm able to run them back, watch them a couple of times, and if there's really interesting phrases in there, I can repeat them, and I have an audio copy to listen to, compare my voice with, and try again if I'm not getting close to that sound. So they're the 3 elements I've been using. Now obviously, you may say, yeah, but you live in a Spanish-speaking country, Graham. Come on, you must get lots of practice. Well, yes and no. Yes, I do get lots of practice, because nearly everybody I meet I have to speak to in Spanish. But if I look at it very carefully, actually a lot of what we talk about is either very basic, just basic hello, goodbye, thank you sort of things, or it's quite short conversations. It's very short conversations in shops, or if I'm talking with my family or friends here, then obviously we know each other. So sometimes our conversations are very basic, kind of day-to-day sort of domestic stuff. It's nothing perhaps that's going to amplify the vocabulary I need to know. This is where the reading has really come in. So the reading and the listening from the podcast has helped a great deal. Reading obviously because then you can see for sure exactly what these words are, how they spell. Because it's really the only way we can catch up as adult learners, the lost time for we weren't learning the language when we were children. So definitely the reading aloud is a very easy way to amplify our vocabulary, look for patterns in the language on a topic that we want to know more about. We'd be selective, it's even better. Now, obviously I'm putting this to the test a little bit in these recently this week and into next week and perhaps the week after, because as I mentioned the other day, I'm now about to start I'm in the course to go for my driving license here in Colombia. So obviously there's whole new rules, and I'm going to do all the exams for this in Spanish. So now it's a bit of a race to learn new vocabulary. Not so much happily because I'm not necessarily going to have to talk a lot about it. Well, I think there will be some actual questions when I come to do the practical driving test. But I'm going to have to sit an exam, which is at least a multi-choice exam, so I need to be able to recognise and understand at least the key words in the questions I'm going to see. So how am I preparing for that? Well, happily, as part of the course, it's fairly clear what areas the questions are going to be on. I know which articles in the driving code are likely to be questioned, so we can look up those, look for the key words that are coming up. So it's going to be literally like a flashcard memory test of those particular sections of the driving code, and some of the key words, so I can know what I'm looking at, so I don't get too confused with them. Happily, they are multiple choice questions, so that means when I'm looking for the answer, again, all I'm really looking for is the key word that matches the one. I recognise that's probably the answer, so hopefully that will be a little bit easier. I'm not going to have to write an essay on this, so that's something a little bit different, and that's useful given the time frame I've got to go. If I had a bit more time, or if I was preparing, for example, to let's say do a video in Spanish on the topic, I might look at this a little bit differently, because I'd have to be thinking a lot harder on how I wanted to express myself, what would I like to say, rather than just knowing about the words I'd likely to read or to hear. But having now been in the classroom for the last sort of 3-4 days, I'm happy that at least my listening in Spanish isn't too bad. I think I'm getting about 80% of what we're saying in the classroom. So I'm not too lost in terms of what we're talking about. So I feel pretty confident I should be okay when I come to take the test. So all in all, in this 75 days I think, I feel it's improved quite a bit. I think I've made pretty good progress. Could I have done more? Yes, frankly I could have done more. There have been some weeks where it's been a bit disrupted, perhaps not always been the ideal day-on-day progress I would have liked to have made, but over 3 months I don't suppose you can expect every day to be exactly as you planned. But generally I think because I've not lost contact with the language I'm trying to learn, so at the very least I've listened to something in Spanish every day, hopefully as well as that I've been able to read something. I think that's help keep me going in the right direction. And on some days when I've had a lot more time, I've been able to focus a bit more strictly on what I'm trying to do. But obviously I think my progress has improved. So I'm interested to know what you think. I mean, déjame saber. Let me know. How have you found this process that you've been following? I mean, we're well into the process now. So I'm interested to see how well you've got on. I'm hopeful that you two have made noticeable progress. Now obviously any type of language is not something we can learn immediately. It's not something that we are going to be fluent in 90 days. No, that's not really necessarily the case. We should be a lot better. In some circumstances, some particular situations, yes, we probably are pretty much functionally fluent. Because in a lot of situations, there are only so many things we can say and only so many questions that people can ask us. But to become completely fluent, as in like native speaker standard for someone our own age, that might take a little bit longer. That's going to take a lot more years of practice, certainly in terms of reading, really improving our vocabulary, and also speaking a lot more, so we get a lot more confident with how we sound and our general production of voice. But I think 3 months, 90 days, that's a good start point to show a bit of progress with it anyway. So I'll keep you posted over the next couple of days in how I'm getting on. I think my study is going to be a little bit fractured beyond what I'd originally intended to do, because now I'm having to focus on this very specific task, which is like pass this test. But even so, the way I'm studying for the test is very similar to what I was doing anyway by preparing sort of the dialogues and other things I was looking at. So I'm looking again at wider vocabulary, some more specific vocabulary that, okay, what's the really important stuff for this particular question? What things, if any, do I need to say? And if there are some things I need to say, like I'm going to be asked I'm going to have to respond to questions, what's the best way for me to say that? So it's really, again, it's that kind of 80-20 split between vocabulary I need to be able to read and understand, or listen to and understand, and the 20% that I need to be able to say. So that's it for now, really. So whatever point you're at with your studies, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're feeling confident now. I think, for instance, if you can follow this video of me rambling in English for 20 minutes, your level must be pretty good. Hopefully the transcription thing on YouTube works fairly well, if you need to use the subtitles. But yeah, déjame saber. And from all of us here in Medellin, feliz noche, and see you soon. Cheerio for now.